pure human is a celebration of what we were given 200,000 years ago, and the invitation to know it, to explore it, to awaken it before we give it away. Because once we give our humanness away, it's not like a little dial where you can say, oh, I don't like that. Let's go back. Because once we replace the biology with the technology, our bodies morph and adapt to that new tech, and we are no longer what we used to be. There's nothing to go back to. We can't go back.
Welcome back to Reconditioned with me, Lauren Vaknin. Thank you so much for being here. And I have just got off of a 2-hour incredible conversation with the amazing Gregg Braden, and I cannot wait for you to hear this episode. We recorded it off the back of him releasing his new book, which he mentions when we record that it's not out yet because it wasn't when we recorded, but by the time you listen to this, it will be out. It's called Pure Human by Gregg Braden. It is life-affirming, life-changing. If you are on the same wavelength I am, which I know that most of my listeners are, and if you're coming to this through Gregg, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And then I know you're on the same wavelength. This book is all about explaining to us how we step into our sovereignty, regardless of manipulation, regardless of anything that's going on around us that is forcing us away from this transhumanism, this, bringing us away from our pure biology and into something different. We have a choice. We've always had choices, right? So it's guiding us into how to be sovereign in a world that is leading us away from our sovereignty. So this conversation, as you can imagine, went very deep. There were many layers. We took it into so many different places. And at the end, we took it into, how are we meant to, what's the best way? I mean, there's no best way for anything, but I asked Gregg, if you were raising young children right now, how would you be doing that? Based on everything we know about what's to come in the next 5 to 10 years. And so it's, a real kind of, this episode is a meditation on how we step into our sovereignty and how we live lives regardless of everything that feels like it's falling apart around us. It's all part of what's meant to be happening. We're meant to be going with it, not resisting it. So that's what this episode is about. It is so powerful, guys. I can't wait for you to hear it. Genuinely, I feel just completely buzzing after 2 hours of this conversation, that I feel so fortunate, so privileged to have had with someone as, wise as Gregg, with all his many, many accolades. So I'm excited for you to listen to it. Again, if you've come here off the back of Gregg, you are one of Gregg's audience members, welcome. Thank you for joining us here on Reconditioned. This is a one-stop shop for all things wellness and growth and spirituality, everything that comes under that. So please make sure to hit the subscribe or follow button, because you will be finding more episodes like this and a whole archive of them over the last few years as well that you can go back on. So thank you for being here. Thank you to my OG listeners for sticking with me and always being here through all these amazing episodes. And there is a lot, and most people don't actually realize a lot of effort that goes into producing a podcast. I don't work with a production company. I do obviously have editors and all of that, but I'm not doing this from like a studio where everyone's doing everything for me. My team and I put a lot of effort and time into this podcast. So if you gain anything from this and want to pay that forward, please do that by subscribing to the podcast and sharing any episodes that resonate with you and that have helped you with your friends and family. That is the way to pay it forward. It doesn't take much from you, and it means the world to me. So enjoy this episode with Gregg Braden. I know you're going to. I can't wait to hear your thoughts about it. I will be posting about it obviously on Instagram on the day it's released, so please chat with me over there about how you feel about this episode. And until next time, I appreciate you. When I was at the HEAL conference at Gaia in Colorado a few months ago, I took with me a jar of Wise Earth adaptogenic honey that I'd been using for an autoimmune trigger, and I left it on the snack table for people to try. On the second day, there was a group of producers and tech people standing around the table looking in awe about something, so I went over. Turns out they'd tried the honey. One of them said, "What the hell is in this stuff? I feel awake and alive for the first time in ages, and I only just took a half spoon 5 minutes ago." Then Kelly Noonan Gores of the Heal documentary, who was hosting the event, was like, "Give me some, I need a pick me up." This was at the end of a very long, amazing, but draining weekend. She took a half spoon and instantly felt revitalized for the rest of the day. Within minutes, all the incredible speakers, guide directors, engineers, everyone was taking this honey. And it was like the energy in the room up-leveled in a way I've never seen. I'm telling you the story exactly as it happened, which is why I'm bringing you this here on Reconditioned. Wise Earth adaptogenic honey was created in response to founder Daniel losing his sister to cancer. It uses traditional Chinese medicine and cutting-edge extraction technology to create a potent adaptogenic honey designed to combat the current leading health issue, chronic inflammation, which is how everything starts. It's helped people from all over the world combat challenges from lack of energy to digestive issues to hormonal imbalances and a range of chronic illnesses. It uses the absolute best quality honey as a carrier of adaptogens such as reishi, chaga, and cordyceps to enhance both bioavailability and taste, ensuring maximum potency and effectiveness. Mix it into your coffee, whack it in your smoothie, or just take it neat on a spoon. You only need a little bit a day for the effects to work. And as I've seen from those around me and my own experience, those effects are huge. So visit wiseearth.uk, that's WYSE, earth.uk for UK or .com for US, and use code Lauren10 for a 10% discount. Gregg Braden is a 5-time New York Times bestselling author, scientist, and a pioneer in the emerging paradigm bridging science, social policy, and human potential. From 1979 to 1990, he worked as a problem solver for Fortune 500 companies. His research resulted in the 2003 discovery of intelligent information encoded into the human genome and the 2010 application of fractal time to predict future occurrences of past events. Gregg's work has led to 17 film credits, 12 award-winning books, now published in over 43 languages, and he was a 2020 nominee for the prestigious Templeton Prize, established to honor outstanding individuals who have devoted their talents to expanding our vision of human purpose and ultimate reality. He's presented his discoveries in over 34 countries on 6 continents and has been invited to speak at the United Nations, Fortune 500 companies, and the US military. So just a small little group of bunch of stuff you've done there, Gregg.
Well, today I'm with you and your community, my family. This is the first time you and I have worked together, Lauren, and the universe gave us a couple of near misses to be able to get to this day today. Mm-hmm. And I'm honored to be with you. And also, I just want to say this is a dance, and I'm very happy to follow your lead in this dance. I don't know precisely where it's going to go. But I do know it requires trust. And I just want to tell you right up front how much I appreciate your trust in me with your community and the conversation we're about to have. I'm excited. So where should we go with this conversation?
Well, I'm excited, and I know my audience is too. Yeah, so we will go straight into talking about the topic that has come about as a result of your incredible new book, Pure Human. But before we do, I have to ask you the question that I ask all my guests before we start, which is, what have you done so far today to support your wellness?
I woke up this morning, first thing this morning, and every morning I wake up and I give thanks for waking up. I give thanks for the healing that has already occurred, because the truth is we are already healed, and there are greater degrees of healing certainly that can be accomplished. Just give thanks for all of those things and for the day that is yet to be. And that's the way I started the day today. And before I go to bed at night, I work. I'm a night person. I work late. And a little after, I don't know, probably around 1 a.m. this morning, I looked at the schedule for today, and I saw your name, and had a big smile on my face. It's a media day, and actually had a little bit hard time sleeping because I was so excited to have our conversation today. So you gave me something joyous to wake up to and to look forward to, Lauren. So thank you for that.
Ah, that's so kind and so sweet. We did, it was, we obviously, for context for everyone, Greg and I met when we were both speaking at the HEAL conference at Gaia in Colorado. And so we've kind of worked together. We were on the same stage, just not at the same time. And it was so amazing getting to know you. But more importantly for me is my audience and getting to know you and the incredible wisdom you have to share about a topic that is maybe something that is kind of inside me, but I've never been able to articulate. But from your scientific background, you've brought it into the public domain so, so beautifully. And so let's go straight into what is Pure Human, this incredible book you've written that is going to be released this month.
Yeah.
What is it about, and what is a pure human?
Well, thank you for that, Lauren. So, first of all, the book is it is not available in this moment. It is scheduled to be released as a hardback in the 28th of January. People can pre-order it, but it will not be physically available until 28th of January. So I didn't want to mislead anyone there.
Well, actually, this will come out after that. So
Okay.
there will
All
be
right. So
good.
so it
So when you
is. It
listen to
is.
this, it will be out.
It is. So the book Pure Human, I wrote it as a celebration of our humanness in a time when our humanness is being denigrated in the mainstream in so many ways. Our young people, Lauren, are being taught that they are a flawed form of life, that carbon-based life in general and human life specifically is a flawed form of life. And among the flaws, for example, are human emotion, which can cloud our decision-making and our thinking and our thought process. They're being taught that they need something outside of themselves to be successful in life and to compete in the world. And that something obviously is being touted as technology. So I have written the book to identify the fact that there is a concerted effort to replace our biology with technology. And this isn't some nebulous concept that's going to happen like sometime, way down the road in the future. There's an expiration date to this. The year 2030, 5 years from now, is the date that is being identified by a number of powers and forces, at least perhaps not completely, but to have this process well underway. So I wrote the book as a celebration of our humanness, and my hope is that when the reader finishes this book, first of all, I have given them really good reasons to think differently about themselves based on rock solid science that is rarely shared in the mainstream. Mainstream classrooms and textbooks aren't talking about this stuff, number one. Number two, I wanted the reader to, at the very least, have a deeper appreciation for what it means to be human on this earth, and maybe even a little step further, a sense of pride. I personally am deeply proud of my humanness and what it means to be human. And the deeper I explore into our past, the genetic mutations that had to happen to make us as we are, that cannot happen in nature, the more in awe I am, not just of who we are, but of the potential that in many people is latent or perhaps dormant, uh, and in many people is awakening right now. So that was the essence of the book. I wrote this for everyone, from a homemaker and a student and a truck driver to an engineer to a legal professional to a scientist. I wanted people to have the reasons to think differently about themselves, but to be able to put it into a bigger context. And that big context, just very honestly, I'll just be, you and I talked about this a little bit when we were at the conference. That bigger context, me discussing it, has cost me some friendships. It has cost me some conferences where they're not comfortable talking about these things. So depending on how deep you want to go, Lauren, I'm happy to dive in, and we'll just do that. We'll do a deep dive on why this book was written right now.
I'd love to do a deep dive. My audience are very, very open, very kind of eyes open sort of people, and we take it everywhere on this podcast. It's all about truth and figuring out what that actually means. So I'd love the deep dive version.
Well, I'm going to start at the top then. I am a scientist. I'm a degreed geologist or earth scientist with a very strong background in math, physics, life sciences, computer science, archaeology, cosmology, and that those things all work together to give me a multidisciplinary view to stay current with the new discoveries, but also to look at the big picture. I'm a systems thinker, and it's important to say that right up front. A systems thinker tends to look at just go a million miles out and look at the big picture to see how everything fits together. And then that allows me to dive into the minutia of what's happening in our world and in our lives. So I'm going to begin with a big picture a lot of people don't want to talk about. Uh, we are immersed in a fundamental battle that we rarely hear about between forces. And those forces in some circles are called light and dark, more commonly good and evil. And when we talk about evil, I mean, we all know about evil and we talk about it. When I was a kid, we used to joke about it. You know, it was just, we used to talk about a little red devil up on our shoulder over here and a little angel here. And, you know, the conversations they were having back and forth. Well, evil is very real. And this isn't a metaphor. And the way evil is expressed in this earth realm ebbs and flows with cycles of time. We happen to be barreling down the road toward a convergence of cycles of time. And what you're seeing in the world right now, what many people said to me, you know, isn't it isn't it interesting that so many things just seem to be happening at the same time? Isn't it interesting that you know that the chaos just seems to be so random, but it's all happening now? Well, it's not random, and it's not by accident. It's by design. We're living a period in time where we're seeing the powers that be. We're seeing corporations, nations, individuals are all jockeying to be in the best possible position when this cycle closes. And the year that has been identified, whether we're talking about the United Nations or the World Economic Forum or many of the technological benchmarks, they're all looking at the year 2030. By the year 2030, there are goals that need to be met to accommodate the world that these people have envisioned. And what makes this so different, there have always been people out there that want to change the world, and you know they have every right to dream. What's different now, Lauren, is not only do we have the technology to change the world outside of us, but for the first time, we have the technology to remake the world inside of us. And those powers and those forces are taking full use of every opportunity to use the technology to redefine what it means to be human. So this is the big picture. I don't want to get stuck in that, but I think it's really good to recognize this isn't business as usual. It's a little window of time. It's not always going to be like this. We're going to get through this, and it's not always going to be this chaotic. But we are going to see an acceleration of the chaos as the powers jockey for that positioning. Uh, so what is it? What is it that they are jockeying to position themselves to be in the best place for? This is where the book comes in. There is when we talk about the forces of good and evil. I'll just step back. You know, one of the first places I began to understand this on a very concrete basis was when I began exploring in 1980s, early 90s. I began exploring the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is very interesting. They were discovered 1946, 47. They were not released to the public until 91. And, you know, you have to say, what could possibly be in a 2,500-year-old text that would warrant the Vatican lobbying to prevent this release, and politicians and the money and the time and the energy expended to prevent that release? Well, you can't make this stuff up. The answer was in the very first cave. There were 11 caves in total. It was in the first cave, in the first clay vase that was discovered in the first cave, and it was the first scroll that came out of that vase that is about 19 columns And the colloquial title of that scroll is called the War, W-A-R, the War Scroll. It's a fascinating document. But the bottom line is that it literally tells us, it reads, and these are the exact words, that we are engaged in an ancient battle that began long before we even arrived on this planet 200,000 years ago. But it's a current battle between what they call in the scroll the sons of darkness and the sons of light. Now, I was in a live program a couple of weeks ago, and there's a woman that was offended because she thought that was a sexist scroll, because the feminine was not identified specifically. I just want to mention, I see where that comes from. 2,500 years ago, they were looking at gender differently than we do today, and the term man was all inclusive of humankind. It implies both male and female. So I don't want anybody to feel left out. So this battle between the sons of darkness and the sons of light, between good and evil. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because a battle has a goal, and the goal of that battle was to deny an aspect of our human experience. That is the goal of the evil, and the aspect that is being denied is what we call human divinity. Okay, so the goal of the battle between the sons of darkness and sons of light, between good and evil, and I'm saying this specifically now because we're going to set a benchmark. We're going to define evil. Evil is anything that denies us access to human divinity. All right, so now let's talk about divinity. Why is it so important? What does that even mean? And you know, we all hear the term, and what I'm finding is it means way different things to different people. So the contemporary definition of divinity actually is very brief. It is the ability to transcend perceived limitations, and that's it. Nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with spirituality, really, but it is about our humanness, the ability to transcend, to become more than, and I love this, perceived limitations. Most of us, there are always exceptions, but most of us are living our lives within the bounds and limits that we've been indoctrinated to accept that aren't even real. We are living within limitations that aren't even real, but through our family, our culture, our society, false, obsolete science, religion, uh, laws, we have been indoctrinated to live within those bounds. So divinity is what frees us from those limitations. Divinity frees us from fear. And fear is a very powerful commodity when it comes to powers that want to control other people. Fear is a very, very powerful commodity. So let me give some examples of divinity. It's front and center in our lives. It's not like a peripheral experience. Our ability to imagine is an expression of human divinity. To create is an expression of human divinity. To innovate, our ability to experience empathy, sympathy, compassion, love, forgiveness, all of these are expressions of human divinity, and they are what empower us in this earth realm. So I can see why, if there was an ancient battle, that battle would be won by denying us the power that frees us from the fear. Now, evil, when we talk about evil, has many expressions, and they're playing in our lives in ways that people don't always recognize. There's certainly psychological evil, for example, playing out on the internet. It's playing out in social media. When the algorithms lead us to believe certain things that will support a narrative and drive us to choose policies that are not good for us, that is an expression of evil. So psychological evil, there's emotional evil, there is kinetic evil, which is actual battle, boots on the ground, Ukraine, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Lebanon, Syria. Actually, the United States right now has troops, boots on the ground in 22 different countries that we rarely hear about. Those are expressions of kinetic evil. There is biological evil. Anything that changes our bodies and this is going to be important, because it's through our biology that we access our divinity. It's through neurons, cell membranes, and DNA that we access our divinity. Anything that alters the neurons, the cell membranes, and the DNA and prevents us from accessing our divinity, that is a form of biological evil. There's technological evil. Technological evil is the same thing. Anything that veils or denies us our divinity. So I'm sharing things with you here. I don't go into so much detail in the book. I do identify the fact that there is this concerted effort to replace our biology with technology. That's where the book begins. And what the experts are telling us, Lauren, very clearly, if we don't shift our thinking in the trajectory that society is on right now, most probably we are the last generation of pure humans. That the world, and assuming there are no humans anywhere else in the universe, we are the last generation of humans that the world will ever know. We're about to give away the extraordinary gift and the potential of our humanness before we even know what it means fully to be human. And I say that because the science is telling the new discoveries, man, they're mind blowing. We're getting into some of them. They're mind blowing because they're telling us that we function in ways that sound like science fiction. But when you begin to look at the biology as a technology, a soft technology, so not a hard technology of computer chips and wires and RFID chips and chemicals in the blood and wires under the skin. But we're more than that. We're cell membranes and neurons and ion potentials moving across cell walls. It's a very, very different way to look at the human body. And this is where science, some science, is going there now. And it's so interesting because in the old days, uh, when I was in school back in 1950s, 1960s, I mean, it's a mind blower to even say that. When I was in school back in the 50s and 60s, we learned about the human body in biology books. And we were led to think of us as soft, wet, sticky, gooey, stuff floating under the skin and inside the cells. And that's a very valid way of thinking. Here's the shift. Within the last 5 years or so, scientists began looking at the human body from an IT perspective, information technology, and the discoveries they're making of how our DNA functions as antenna, for example, or the electrical potential and the circuitry within the human body. They don't publish that in biology books. It's in these obscure engineering, like IEEE journal, for example, or these engineering journals that most people aren't ever going to see. So they're okay. I mean, they say, yeah, I mean, this is real stuff, but we don't get to see that. So the point is that through our biology, we have access to our divinity. And anything that alters our biology is or veils our ability to access our divinity, that is a form of evil as well. So now we have a benchmark for evil. It's not this nebulous concept. Anything that denies our divinity. And I want to say something about this because when we talk about a battle, and then I'll stop. When we talk about a battle, the old idea of a battle is we think of force against force, conflict like this. We're talking about a very, very different kind of battle. In the battle between good and evil, it's not a battle that we want to win. A lot of people are surprised by that because to win suggests that we are engaged in the conflict. It's a battle in which we triumph over evil rather than win by beating evil to its knees. And this is deeply spiritual. Very, very different principles. How do we triumph? The goal of the evil is to deny our divinity. The way that we triumph is by living our divinity to the best of our ability, living the best version of ourselves, loving fearlessly, allowing the body to do what the body knows how to do. Our bodies are so intelligent when it comes to healing. Forgiving, without the expectation that something's going to come back. A lot of people forgive, and then they look around and they say, well, who just saw me do that forgiving so I can be acknowledged? That's not the point. To imagine freely and to innovate and to be able to share ideas with other humans freely. Freedom is a powerful component of divinity. Sovereignty is a powerful component of divinity. And anything that violates those freedoms and our sovereignty, these are all expressions of evil. So from this perspective, now you look at the world around us and these crazy things that look like they're random, and you can see that there is a process, and you can see that there's a system, and you can see that that we are being motivated to make choices that are not good for us, and across the board. And I talk about this. I'm just say this, and then I'll stop. We're being invited to make a lot of climate change is where it began for me as a geologist. Climate change is real. We need to stop burning fossil fuels. We've had the technology to do it for over 70 years. Right now, however, if we were to meet all of the goals that have been put forward by the UN, we would have a world so very different from the world we have right now. Their proposal is to push carbon dioxide levels back to about 280, 85 parts per million, which is very low in terms of Earth. No, it's 212. It's 212 parts per million. 180 parts per million is extinction level. So they're within just a few points of pushing carbon dioxide levels back to those levels. That's not good for us. It's not good for humans. They want to reduce the global temperature, the average, by 10 degrees. Right now, the global average is about 56 degrees Fahrenheit. So 46 degrees Fahrenheit, that's not good for us. The last time we saw those conditions on this planet was in the time called the Pleistocene geologic era. And we saw a lot of extinction of large mammals. Forests died. It was not a good time for life or for human life on the planet. So those goals are not good for us. Now you look at what's happening geopolitically. Superpowers are being pushed into war, depleting their armaments, depleting their resources, depleting the people that are able to fight to defend this planet if we ever had to do that. All of those resources are being depleted. That's not good for us here on Earth. Now you look at what's happening through the social media. The social bonds that have always held us together are being broken. The bonds that hold together families, they're being weaponized. The differences have been weaponized when it comes to gender, when it comes to the rich against the poor, blacks against the whites, Christians against Muslims, Jews against Muslims, men against women, adults against children. All of that systematically is being dismantled. Religion is being dismantled. This is not good for us. It's not good for humans. Now, you look at what's happening with the technology, and we are being strongly encouraged and perhaps mandated to replace our very biology with technology. That's not good for us. That's not good for humans. It's not good for life. So this is a big picture, and it's within this big picture that the new discoveries are now revealing human potentials that make the science fiction become very real. Human potentials in terms of our ability to self-regulate our own biology, to self-regulate our immune system, to self-regulate our resilience, to change, to self-regulate our healing and our longevity, to create deep states of intuition, super memory, super learning, super consciousness, super cognition at will, and so much more. So this is kind of the big picture, and the book is designed to lay out that picture and to show why, when we embrace the technology, that we have within us, we feel less of an urgency to bring that technology from the world outside of us. So that was a long answer to a short question, Lauren.
I have so many questions. And I'm going to try and bring in my best
Sure.
journalistic skills here to nutshell it all.
Well, let
I
me ask
guess
this: that what I laid, did it make sense? What I just laid out
so much sense that that's why I've got so many questions.
okay.
Because I guess from me, on a personal level, I think that I've always believed that my journey in the health world, having, had, a debilitating disease from infancy and having to go through that conventional system, finding myself realizing that wasn't going to heal me, and then stepping out of it because that happens so young. I find that in my adult years, I've always been able to quietly observe what's happening with certain things that make complete sense to me, but that to the average person, that makes me a complete conspiracy theorist. So these things that you're talking about make such deep sense to me, from, the kind of geopolitical aspect, the biology, and that's what I really want to get into. And what I
Well,
think,
I just want to jump in. I apologize for interrupting, but I just want to say everything I just said is not a secret. It is all publicly available. And this is the insidious nature of all of this. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. It is blatantly being put right into the, whether it's social, political, economic, it's everywhere. They're not even trying to hide it. So I didn't just reveal any deep, dark secrets. Rarely is it put together the way that we're talking about right now. And I think that's what's important here. So the healthcare part that you're doing has always been a big piece of this, whether you recognize where it fit or not, because that is human divinity. As we embrace the body's wisdom and the body's intelligence to awaken this extraordinary technology, soft technology, then we are reclaiming our divinity in that way. And so thank you for contributing to this ancient battle in all the ways that you have and continue to do.
some of you may remember that towards the end of 2024, I had a bit of an inflammatory flare up. Now, having been in remission for so long, it was quite challenging. And even with all my tools and the best practitioners at my fingertips, it wasn't shifting. And there were many reasons for that, but a friend told me about the energy enhancement system that has taken off like crazy in the States, but it had just opened in the UK. And I really was trying everything I could to heal, so I went to check it out. Honestly, safe to say, I've never looked back. And if you're suffering with anything from autoimmune conditions to mental health challenges to cancer, even if your pet is unwell, please stick with me for 60 seconds while I tell you what this incredible system of healing is. So EES creates special energy fields using scalar waves and biophotons that allow your body to return to a place of homeostasis and balance, because that's the frequency our bodies should be vibrating at when in a state of wholeness. These fields help to balance and optimize your body's natural processes, promoting healing and overall well-being. I've personally now had 2 daytime sessions and have also stayed overnight twice, giving my body 11 hours of recharging within the scalar waves. And all I can say, and my friends who I sent say the same, is I've never fallen into a deeper meditation or a more relaxed state than when I'm in there, showing me that it's absolutely doing something with my energy field, thereby promoting wellness. The energy enhancement system promotes the body's ability to detox, reduce inflammation, reduce pain, improve circulation, improve sleep quality, improve immune function. It regenerates cells and it balances the right and left hemispheres of the brain, which is why we go into such deep meditation when we're in there. And that's just the beginning. Guys, the body is designed to heal from everything and anything. And when it's synchronizing with the healthy, energetic environment generated by the system, it can. They're based in London. I cannot recommend it enough. And you can get 18% off any length session by using code RECONDITIONED18 when booking. That's reconditioned18. Just visit www.energyenhancementcentre.co.uk to book, or you can head to the show notes for all the links. I cannot wait to hear your success stories. And please note, EES do not make any medical claims. Yeah, some journey, but what I'm interested to know your perspective on, because I have my own views on it, but obviously I'm not an expert in any way like you are. What is it that is, hacking, if you like to use that word, or whatever word whatever terminology, what is getting into our biology that is changing our biology from what it was to what they're wanting it to become, that is not part of our divinity?
This is where it gets, I mean, again, I don't know how deep you want to go with this. When we talk about the word conspiracy, it means different things to different people. Conspiracy simply means that a group of people have come together conspiring to accomplish something. So this is all the result of people coming together to conspire to remake the world and remake our bodies. It's not a theory because they're telling us they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just take this down to a little bit different level. One of the ways that we're seeing this, so I'm assuming that your community knows who the World Economic Forum is, founded 1971. They've gotten together every year in Davos. They think about what they want the world to look like. They have every right to do that. It's never been much of a problem because they've never had the teeth to be able to implement their ideas. All right. All that changed in 2019. 2019, the WEF signed a formal agreement with the United Nations, who we in my country and you in your country and the EU as well are legally bound to follow guidance and protocols from the UN. Well, the UN has had since the year 2015, they work in 15-year horizons, is what they call them. So in 2015, the UN put together a series of goals to be accomplished by the year 2030. That's that date again. They're called the UN SDG 2030, UN Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. And, I once again, when I was a kid, Lauren, I had the highest respect and the deepest reverence for the United Nations. And I really felt like they were the great hope for America. I was born in the generation right after World War II, a very frightening time. And I always felt, that the UN was our hope. That has changed. And I want to be clear, there are some really good people working in the UN, and I have friends who are working there, but there are UNs within UNs.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not even in agreement with one another. So they put together these 17 sustainable development goals, and anyone can go out and look at the UN website. You can see them. The titles are beautiful and represent things that we all want. The end of poverty, for example, is one. Food security is another one. The end of, I think it was global wellness or childhood wellness. And, who doesn't want these things? And now you read into the fine print of how they want to accomplish those goals. And the only way to accomplish those goals is to remake not only the world around us, but the world within us, to bring us into a digital, massive global database run by an artificial intelligence. And the World Economic Forum now has acknowledged that their goals are so close to the UN goals that they've joined forces. And so this is a very concerning partnership, because under the UN is the WHO, and that impacts the kinds of things that you're talking about, World Health Organization and other organizations. But one of the reasons I was saying this is because the keynote presentations in the World Economic Forum in Davos are now reflecting what I'm saying and what we're talking about in terms of technology. They are saying the human genome is now considered hackable technology, and that we, through our engineering, our discoveries, we have what's called right, WRITE, right level permission. So as a former computer systems designer, what I know is when they say that, right level permission is where you are given permission to change the fundamental code driving a system. So they're saying we have that now. They're also saying that by the year 2030, unless something changes, we very probably are the last generation of pure humans. When you talk to someone in the market, you'll be talking to a hybrid, some degree, some people more, some people less, to some degree of hybrid between biology and technology. Now, in Europe, one of the countries, it surprised me, one of the countries leading this, and by the way, the term for everything we're using is, I know your listeners are familiar with it, it's transhuman. Trans simply means beyond. So we talk about transgender, it's beyond gender. Transhuman, beyond human. And one of the nations in Europe who is leading this transhuman thinking is Sweden. And I was surprised by that. But they have openly accepted the use of RFID chips, multiple RFID chips inside of individuals. I saw a marketing video recently, and I know it's happening, and I'm still amazed at how good they make it look, how sexy, how appealing they make it look. So here's a guy, he's walking down the street, the birds are singing, the sky is blue. He has no briefcase, he has no billfold, he has no car keys, and you know where this is going. He says he's never been freer in his life. This particular guy has 15 RFID chips in his body. So one of them opens the security door at his place of employment. One of them starts the car. One of them, you go to the ATM, gets his money, go to the market, and he runs his wrist over the scanner, and he pays for his groceries because it's linked into his bank account. And this is just one example of how this is being brought into our lives. What they're not telling the public when they show these is the price that we pay for what they call freedom. We're being told, for example, you're safer if you do this because you can never be lost, which is true. You can never be lost. You can be tracked anywhere on the face of the earth, under the oceans, or in the air. They're saying that we will be more secure, that we'll be safer. And here's the thing about technology. I love tech. I worked in the defense industry during the Cold War years, and I saw some of the most advanced technology, laser beams, space-based lasers, communications, radar. It's not the technology that's the problem. It's the thinking underlying the technology. Lauren, if we had a benevolent government, whether it's a nation or a planet, that truly cared for and loved its citizens, and these technologies could be implemented to honor our sovereignty and our divinity and our trust, that would take us on a very different trajectory. But the motivation for the kinds of things we're seeing, it's not benevolence and care and love and compassion. It is fear, control, the ability to control individuals, and to regulate the way that individuals live. And so this is where it comes into currency, the way that people tend to discount the whole idea of digital money, digital currency. But if you think about every euro or every British pound or every US dollar having a little chip on it, that's the equivalent of what's being proposed through the central bank digital currencies. And it could be a really good thing, but the thinking behind it suggests that it's not. That our travel, what we consume, and the choices we make in our lives will be forced through our ability or inability to use that currency because it is run through, a larger digital system. So all of these, the ideas of the WEF are so closely aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. They've joined forces, and now they actually have lobbyists, like there are pharmaceutical lobbyists for the United States Congress. There are petroleum, oil and gas lobbyists. Now there are lobbyists to try to get the legislation passed, and it's having some success in some instances, to support these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And I think it's important for us to be very aware of how those are coming about. So when you talk about what's coming into our bodies, I think we could do a whole program on this. It's been happening for a long time. We have been fed toxic foods and consumed toxic water. I'm blessed to live in a rural area where we have our own wells. The government now wants to cap our wells and force us onto city water that everyone else is using so they can control that. And we as a community are pushing back on that. It's a lifestyle that I live in northern New Mexico, and these are farming communities. We've always had, access to our own water, and we'd like to keep that. If people don't want that, go move into a city. But don't try to change. The thing is, they're trying to change traditional lifestyles and traditional ways of living. They're trying to make this planet into something that it's not, to accomplish the vision of a handful of people who we never elected to represent us, unelected officials. And those officials range from, corporate CEOs to leaders of nations to financial, banking organizations. So the ideas aren't new. What changed is the technology is now available to implement the ideas, and the structure of the United Nations is now making those implementations possible. Those are the two things that changed in just the last few years.
Mm. So I'm going to go in with a really blunt question, because I know
Sure.
you don't mind this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important for my audience, and I want to get to the root of the truth.
Sure.
There are many ways in which they're hacking our biology. Was the, let's call it
I know what you're
sorry?
going to say.
Yeah.
So we're going to have code words, right?
We're going to have code words so we don't get
Gregg and
removed from
Lauren's
any.
big fun code words.
Was the CV
Sure.
part of this agenda to hack our biology?
So this is a really delicate question. And I'm going to back up a half a step to give us the framework to answer it in a way that's honest, truthful, and factual. When we talk about evil, there are layers of evil. Okay. At the very top of those layers of evil, the forces at play know exactly what they're doing and exactly the goals that they hope to accomplish and exactly the price and the cost of human life to accomplish that. Now, as their ideas filter down through the segments of society, there are other individuals who have a propensity for greed, for example, or a propensity for control, or a propensity for perversions of whatever kind.
Well, we're thinking of the same guy.
Well, that's not necessarily one person, but
No, I know.
there are individuals who have those propensities that will fall into that framework, and they will support evil. I'm not saying the people are evil, but the things they're doing are evil. And I'm going to make a distinction there. They may not be aware of the role that they're playing. Most of them are not, of the role that they're playing in the battle between the sons of darkness and the sons of light. They're not aware of that role. And so that trickles down to our everyday friends, family, healthcare providers, whatever it is. And a lot of them are really good people who believe what it is that they have been told. And they actually perpetuated evil deeds, but I'm not saying they're evil people. So this is where it gets really, really delicate. Some people know exactly what's going on, and some people are very naive and just follow the game. So we have to be careful about labeling people like that. So when it comes to the actual technology, that technology was never what we were told it was. And within the first 30 days of when we all experienced what we all experienced in the spring of 20, Uh, the real science papers were out there and they were available. They weren't allowed to be shared. The algorithms wouldn't allow them to be shared, but they showed precisely the origin of what we were experiencing, and they showed precisely the effects of the remedy that we were being asked to accept. Uh, and they knew early on it was not good for us. It was not good for us. And this is really close to me because I lost my mom to COVID.
I'm so
And
sorry.
well, thank you. And it was really interesting because she was in late stage dementia, but she wasn't going to leave this world yet. And I was her power of attorney for everything, for housing, food, medical care. And the facility that she was in called me and said, "We need your permission to give this new therapy to your mom, or she can't be here with us." And we certainly weren't equipped to deal with late stage dementia. I mean, there's a whole thing around that. And I struggled with that. I had 3 weeks to make the decision. And during those 3 weeks, they sent me the information sheet from the pharmaceutical company telling me about what it was that I was being asked to give to my mom. And I have to say, straight up, very honestly, that the pharmaceutical company was very honest in those fact sheets about what they had created. They were very honest about what they did do, what they didn't do, what the dangers were. It was the way that was being portrayed by the officials in the media. But, and I read those things, and here's what happened. The week that I had to make that decision, they called me one morning and they said, your mom is not doing well. Do we have your permission to give her aspirin? I said, aspirin? I said, if she's in pain, give her morphine. You know, I don't want my mom in any pain. And I asked them, I said, is my mom dying? And they said, no, we don't think so, but she does have a respiratory infection. It was 9:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock that night. They called me and said, your mom's gone.
Mm,
And my mom left before I had to make that decision. And I think on some level, she didn't want to burden me with that. There's a whole history, but I'm the product of a very dysfunctional, abusive, alcoholic family. And my mom advocated for me when I was powerless to do so as a child in that environment, on that end of our lives. On the other end, like bookends, when she was powerless, I had the opportunity to advocate for my mom. And and I never allowed her to take anything that wasn't good for her. We never did any of the pharmaceutical remedies, and she outlived her prognosis by 6 years, which is
mm,
that's a long time. But I gave her only things, and I'm a scholar. I researched this the kind of dementia. There are many kinds of dementia, and the kind that she wasn't Alzheimer's. It was a vascular dementia, and there's a lot of research about compounds found in sea animals and herbs from the Amazon that really can help. I knew that it wasn't going to save her, but I wanted her to come in for a soft landing
mm,
rather than a crash, and it did just that. When my mom, and I want people to have a good feeling about this, when she left, the last time I was allowed to see her, because I wasn't even allowed, when this whole thing happened. I wasn't allowed before, I wasn't allowed when she was sick, and I wasn't even allowed to be with her after she had died. But the last time I talked to her, she was a very happy girl. And she was
mm,
happy because she'd forgotten everything that ever hurt her
mm,
in her life. And that's, if you're going to go, that's not a bad way
mm,
to go. She was very, very happy, very peaceful. And I'd talk to her and I'd say, so tell me about your life. And she'd say, I had the most wonderful marriage and I had the most wonderful children. And my body has always been so, so good. I mean, she had cancer and she didn't even remember it. So, and that was the
mm,
way she left this world. And that's a beautiful, beautiful, it's not, you know, I prefer to be honest with myself, but the way that she chose to deal with her situation, that was a beautiful way for her to go.
mm,
So, so it was that I was being asked to administer to my mom was never what we were told that it was. It was always experimental.
mm,
I just saw a really interesting interview with some of the healthcare professionals who were saying this stuff was tested. Uh, and the way they're able to say that is because it was tested in a very limited group for a very brief period of time.
Mm.
Um, it did
I
not go
always
through the.
wonder, what's one step, sorry to interrupt, but one step deeper than that. Was it experimental, or were there people who knew exactly what it was? And because if
Well,
you're talking about hacking our biology, there's obviously something, if that is able to do that, there was obviously some
the reason
agenda in that.
the reason I think so again, that's a nuanced conversation. The technology itself was not experimental. It had been around for quite a while. The reason I say experimental is because there were different um, formulations that were tested on the public. In other words, there was not one single formula. And this was the whole point of um, what's called the EUA, emergency use authorization, is they didn't have to lock down that formula.
Mm.
So there were different batches with different code names, code numbers with different formulas that had different effects,
Mhm.
ranging from pretty much nothing to pretty much the worst.
Mhm.
And I think that there was an experimental factor that was going into that. But where this gets tricky, and this is where, I mean, my local radio. That's when I stopped listening to my local radio. I had my local radio station in a rural community that I've always trusted. They brought in this quote healthcare professional every day, every afternoon at 3 o'clock. They'd bring him on, and I don't think he's a bad man. I think he's a good man, and he believed what he was saying. The problem is that those people were so arrogant and so condescending
Mm.
that they would not allow any other conversation. And as a scientist, this is where we get into trouble. When someone says this, the science is settled, like they have been saying with climate change, for example, I know that I'm speaking with someone that is either naive or that knows exactly what they're doing and simply wants to shut down that conversation.
Mhm.
Because the science is never settled. Science is a living body of information. It is designed to be constantly updated as we learn new things about whatever it is that we're studying. So when someone says the science is settled, I knew we were in trouble. And when they began advocating for uh, isolating uh, individuals in certain sections of the city, in facilities that were being repurposed, taking people away from their families and things. I mean, it got crazy.
Mhm.
But because they were misled through the algorithms, through the social media, through the mainstream media, and we joke about this. You've probably seen some of the collages or the montages where you go to one mainstream media and they're talking about a particular topic and there are keywords and phrases, and then you go to the next and it's exactly the same keywords and phrases, and then the next and the next. So obviously they're being fed the information to convince the public to make the choice rather than having the choice imposed upon them. And I think that was part of the experimental part as well. It's not effective to impose upon a society. What is more effective is to provide the information that leads people to make the choices that accomplish the goals, even if that information's not true, even if it's
Mhm.
not correct. And I think we're seeing it. We're still seeing that.
Mhm.
We saw it during an election here in our country, and there are. This is where the spiritual component to all this comes in, Lauren, because the question is, what do we allow the events of the world to make us into? What do we allow the information to do to us? Do we allow ourselves to succumb to the most primal levels of fear and hate and revenge based on what we have been taught? And that is precisely what happened here. It's still happening in the US. based upon disinformation, misinformation, skewed, distorted information from trusted news sources that people had trusted always in the past.
Mm.
So it people, but that's a choice. We have to allow
Right.
ourselves to be driven or to succumb to that kind of hate and that kind of
Mm.
fear. I've lost friends that I've known for years uh, that won't talk to me any longer because
Mm.
these conversations are very difficult for them.
Yeah, well, same. And my whole community, I'm very fortunate to have a community of friends who are all like-minded. And during that time in, 1920 and 21, 1920, 2020, going back a century, all lost friends, had issues with family members. It's just part of that process, I think, of
Well,
uh,
well, here's part of the dumbing down. What I found in the people I talked to, Lauren, and I was surprised by this. Now, I'm a scientist, but I am certainly not a virologist. I am not an infectious disease specialist. I don't claim to be. But what I found is that a lot of friends in my community, in our genre, even through our publishers, had not even a rudimentary understanding of how their own bodies function and their immune systems work.
Mhm.
And because of that, they were very easily led to accept something that was so vastly different than anything that we had ever done in the past.
Mhm.
So, for example, on the radio program I was talking about, they had veterans that we're calling military veterans. And they're saying, man, I don't see what the big deal is. When I went into Vietnam, I walked across a room, a gauntlet, and I was receiving injections in both arms all the way through the gauntlet. I have no idea what they gave me, and I'm fine. So
He's
what's
fine,
the
but meanwhile,
what?
hundreds of thousands of vets, got cancer
Well,
and died. And
I know, but the distinction in the media was never made clear
Mm, mm.
of how this technology differed from traditional technologies I had when I was a kid. And if I needed those traditional technologies, where I don't need them. But if for some reason something happened, and I had to have something, the old idea was you take a little bit of something that's the contagion that has been disarmed, and you place that little bit in your body, and it kind of wakes up the immune system, and that is a valid concept.
Yes, which
Uh,
homeopathy does just fine.
exactly. That's just what I was
That's
going to say.
exactly what
Exactly.
homeopathy does.
And that is not the fundamental principle shifted. And that is not what was being done with these technologies. And then I go back to the keynote talks at it was 2022 at the WEF that human DNA is now hackable technology.
Mm,
And so what these platforms were doing was just that. They were programming the body to produce the toxin, a version of the toxin, rather than introducing it in a weaker or disabled form. They were programming the body to produce it uh, within the body.
mm,
And that became problematic when they discovered that in at least some individuals, the body doesn't know when to stop doing that.
right.
So now there are also, I mean, these are peer-reviewed journals are coming out with all kinds of papers on how to degrade the the protein that's the contagion that's causing the problems with things like NAC and bromelain, the combination,
Mhm.
not individually, but those two working synergistically, uh, degrade the spike protein so that it cannot perform the functions. And so I'm saying that because there are always remedies
Yeah.
when you understand the technology. But for someone that doesn't even understand the base, and I've learned this with climate change. People that
Mm,
are arguing with me about, because of what the UN is saying, their models are showing. Well, the models,
mm,
those models, if a model is a good model, you should be able to plug in the data from the year that just happened because it actually happened. And then the model will show you what just happened. And the models are so bad, they plug in the data from the year that happened, and the models are still skewed. There are factors that are not being taken into consideration. We could have a whole program.
That's the key. If you've chosen to listen to this podcast, I probably don't need to tell you about the importance of connecting with the Earth's electromagnetic field daily, a lot, if we want to optimize health. Spending more time grounding, i.e. barefoot on the earth, actually helps the healing process and boosts immune function. But the reality is that most of us just aren't outdoors enough to get the full benefits of connecting with the natural frequencies of the earth. Even our footwear blocks this connection. So what do? Well, enter earthing sheets. I have an earthing sheet in my bed from Roland Earthing, and I've not only noticed an improvement in my sleep quality, yay, but also an improvement in overall vitality. By sleeping on an earthing sheet, you restore the electrical connection to the earth that you miss out on by not being on the earth enough during sleep, replicating being grounded in nature. And it works best this way because our bodies repair while we sleep, and we're there for ages. So really, this is the most valuable time to maximize efficiency of your earthing practice. The sheets are made from organic cotton and they just go under your bedsheet. And not just that, Roland Earthing donates 1% of all sales to Farmers Footprint, Zach Bush's amazing charitable organization, which really means a lot to me. Earthing sheets are also said to be really great for children with sleep issues and cognitive challenges. So all in all, I couldn't recommend these earthing sheets enough. And you can get a 5% discount by visiting rolandearthing.co.uk. That's ROWLAND earthing.co.uk. And use the code Lauren5 to get a great 5% discount off your first order. I believe, Greg, that the biggest problem we face as humanity is that despite the fact that nothing has ever told us otherwise, we do not believe in nuance. We want everything to be black and white. So when you mention about the vets going in saying, well, I had all of these when I was young, I hear this every day. I had such and such, or my kid has had such and such, and they're fine. There is nuance to everything. And you could open that shell, you could crack that shell so wide open, and I could give a million answers to that. What's your perception of fine? What is your definition of fine? I had one, when I was 18 months, and that's what triggered rheumatoid arthritis in me that essentially disabled me for, the best part of my life. So, but that is the nuance with everything, right? So you could say the nuance within, like you were saying, there are different batches. So there's no one size fits all. There's no complete answer for anything. But what it all comes down to is that if we as sovereign beings, and I think what Pure Human is getting to is the fact that of bringing us back to our sovereignty. If we as sovereign beings can make decisions not based on these bits of information we're being fed by media that is, corrupt and has an agenda, but we can tune back in with our intuition, our deep sovereignty, our divinity, as you say, we can make decisions from a place that is being guided from somewhere completely, has infinite more intelligence than what we think we're being told. And I think the biggest issue facing us is that we've been so suppressed and oppressed in terms of how we basically believe that we're stupid most of the time, that we can't think for ourselves and we can't make decisions for ourselves, and we don't have access to the intuition that can guide us to the very real right decisions.
Well, this is coming back to the book Pure Human. So we've gone off on a few tangents.
Yes.
And I want to be clear that those tangents are not all explored in the book itself.
No, and let's go back to Pure Human because it is about this divinity, and but it is also connected in the way that you explore how we're hacking our biology. So, and
it's totally connected. I just don't want the readers or the viewers to believe that everything we're saying now is reflected in the book. Because I wanted to make a point in the book. And so within this context, this fundamental battle between good and evil, the goal is to deny our divinity. The deepest, most cherished expressions of our humanness is what evil wants to deny. And now the new science that I mentioned, it's beginning to look at us not from a biological perspective, but from an IT, information technology perspective. And the Russians actually are way ahead of America in this. I remember during the Cold War, there Cold War was very interesting. Is a very civilized war. In some respects, the governments were fighting, but the scientists were cooperating. And a lot of people don't know this. You know, the United States and Soviet Union, we built a space station together, and that I mean that level of cooperation brought tears to my eyes. Look, what great and beautiful things could we accomplish today if America and Russia and China all, what if the leaders just sat in a room with no armies
Mm.
and no security and no technology behind them, human to human, eye to eye, heart to heart? They brought in pictures of their kids and their grandkids,
Mm.
and they said, whatever time we have left in this world, how much good can we do? What great and beautiful things can we do on this planet for our children? I think about that a lot. And if I were president of the world, I would facilitate that meeting. But the when we look at the way that they were allowing themselves to see the human body. So we know the average human's got about 50 trillion cells, give or take. Every one of those cells is now acknowledged as an electrical circuit, input, output. We have components in our cells that function as transistors, resistors, capacitors. We emit photons of light and we receive photons of light. Light is information. So we're constantly receiving and transmitting information. Our DNA stores every successful genetic transaction of our species is stored in our DNA, and it is stored in a way that is secure, transparent, and immutable. And if that sounds familiar to anybody, that is precisely the principles of blockchain technology. The blockchain technology that is the foundation for the new financial systems of the world mimics the way we store information in our DNA. One of the journal, this is fascinating to me. It was in the Journal of Advanced Computing Technology, published, and I do talk about this in the book, and I've got the reference in the book, that human DNA functions as what they call a fractal antenna. So we know that an antenna tunes to a signal. Fractal antenna means we are tuned to many different signals across a broad spectrum simultaneously. So not only are we receiving, but we're transmitting, and it goes on and on and on. One of the things I learned, Lauren, when I was in the industry as a problem solver for these Fortune 500 companies, was the more complex the technology is behind the scenes, the simpler the user interface. And that's true with us. We are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology, and our user interface are the principles of our most ancient and cherished spiritual tradition:
Mm.
thought, feeling, emotion, breath, focus, nutrition, and movement. And that's it. And when we learn how to combine those interfaces in just the right way, we open the door to these extraordinary potentials.
Mm.
So I just want to give an example. Are you okay on time? Can I give a couple of examples here?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, so one of the things I'm just going to go in the first hour of our conversation, I made a statement, but I didn't really back it up. That biology is the key to divinity. It's through our bodies that we access the divinity. And I mean, what does that really mean? Divinity doesn't live inside of us. We are tuned to a place in the field that scientists now acknowledge. It was actually the CERN superconducting supercollider in July of 2012 announced. I mean, we've always known it, but science formally acknowledged the existence of a field that underlies all of creation. And that's a very real, I'll get a drink here. It's a very real field. So there was an experiment that was done in 2022 that I think really illustrates what I'm talking about here. And if I believe I shared this experiment in Boulder when at the conference, if you saw it there. But what scientists did, so I'm just going to go back. 1972, there was one of the first computer games was made available to the public, a very primitive game called Pong, P-O-N-G. It just looked like very rudimentary game of tennis on the computer screen. And people were mesmerized. I mean, they would hours playing this silly game of Pong. And so that game is pervasive. So many people played it that it's in the field. I mean, there's a memory of that game that's in the field. So here's what happened. 2022, scientists took human neurons not attached to a human, and they put them into a petri dish. And I think most of your viewers are familiar that the neurons, some people call them tentacles, but they're actually little dendrites, the little arms that flow from a neuron. And they built a special computer chip so that those little tentacles could be connected to the chip. So now you've got a technology biology interface here. And so live neurons in a petri dish connected to a computer chip. They put the computer chip into a computer. The computer is loaded with the game Pong. All of a sudden, these isolated neurons began playing the game of Pong. They knew how to play, and the longer they played, the better they got. They were learning as they were playing. All right, so this is the mind blower for the scientists. Now they're looking inside the neuron. Where are the instructions in the neuron to tell it how to play Pong? Well, the instructions aren't in the neuron. The neuron is a biological antenna that tunes to the place in the field where Pong lives. Our neurons and our cell membranes and our DNA are the biological antenna that tune to the place in the field where our divinity lives. And this is why when you replace biology with synthetics, you lose access to your divinity. Synthetics cannot communicate with that field. You can still be alive, but you're going to be alive and you won't be able to access empathy, sympathy, compassion, love, forgiveness, those subtle nuances of human experience, imagination and creativity. You follow commands, certainly, but we lose those aspects. So I wanted people to kind of see why the biology is so important. Now let's do this from a biblical perspective, because some people are biblically oriented, not religion, but the Bible is a historic text. In the Bible, in the New Testament, there's a passage in the book of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians. And I didn't know we were going to do this. I don't have it in front of me, but it's 1 Corinthians 3:16. And literally the prophet is saying, know ye not that your body is the temple of God, and within your body is the living God. Within our DNA is the information that allows these godlike qualities, this divinity. This is so interesting to me because as an amateur archaeologist, when I've led groups into Egypt and Greece and, through Peru and so many places that have built temples in the past, when they build temples, they typically build them in layers. And the innermost layer of every temple is where the deepest mysteries and the greatest secrets are held. Well, if we are a temple, if our body is a temple, is that true for us? In the ancient temples, that innermost sanctum is called the Holy of Holies. So, for example, in Jerusalem, the Ark of the Covenant was held within the Holy of Holies of the temple. Do we have a Holy of Holies? Well, we have not one, we have 50 trillion Holy of Holies, because the nucleus of every cell is the information that gives us access to our divinity, our DNA. So our body truly is a temple. And I think from this perspective, maybe the greatest task that any of us have is to preserve and protect the temple, the gift of the body. And we know the body is a gift because the mutations that give us our humanness cannot happen under natural. And I do talk about this in the book as well. They can't happen under natural circumstances. There was a fusion of two chromosomes to give us chromosome number 2, there was a genetic shift in chromosome 7 that gives us, connects our tongue and our brain and our jaw. That gives us complex speech and allows us to sing. I'm a musician when I don't do this, and I think about this a lot. I'm so grateful for that mutation so that we can sing. No other form of life. Chimpanzees share 98% of our DNA, and they cannot sing because that genetic shift never happened in their chromosome 2, only to us. And all these changes happened at the same time, not slowly, gradually over a long period of time. And they all happened when we appeared. And scientists are pretty much in agreement. We appeared about 200,000 years ago, or 10,000 generations. That's not that long. We've only been here for 10,000 generations, and look at what we've become, and look at what we can become. So pure human is a celebration of what we were given 200,000 years ago, and the invitation to know it, to explore it, to awaken it before we give it away. Because once we give our humanness away, it's not like a little dial where you can say, oh, I don't like that. Let's go back. Because once we replace the biology with the technology, our bodies morph and adapt to that new tech, and we are no longer what we used to be. There's nothing to go back to. We can't go back. There's an adage in biology called use it or lose it. And I was surprised when I learned this. The thinking used to be that our brains have a fixed number of neurons when we're born, and that's it. That's all you get. And as you go through life, the choices you make, what kind of beer you drink, you lose your neurons. Now we know it's not true, that we're producing new brain cells, including neurons, until our last breath. But there's a catch. And the catch is that they must be engaged in a meaningful way within about a week, about 7 days, or they will atrophy and die because the body feels that they're no longer needed. That principle applies to everything in the body, including the immune system. When we have synthetics that are mimicking or attempting to mimic our immune system, then our body, and it continues, our body says, well, maybe you don't need me to do what you used to do. And in one generation, the next generation, that immune response becomes a vestige of what we used to be, because now we are entirely dependent on the external technology, on the synthetics. And this applies to sex, it applies to the immune response, it applies to cognition. So these are all this is what the science is showing us right now. And a lot of the people who are developing the technology are not aware of these things. And I'm not saying they're bad people. A lot of them are just techies. Lauren, if you're a techie working at Google, or Facebook or something, and you're a young kid, male or female, they give them a huge salary, the most advanced technology in the world, and they're saying, hey, take this as far as you can take it. That's exactly what they're going to do. And I've talked to some of these people, and I say, well, what are the social implications? What does it mean for us if you do this? And here's what they say. Blinders. They said, I don't know. Don't ask me. It's above my pay grade. Go ask a sociologist. Let them figure it out. We're just going to push this tech until somebody reels us in. And that's exactly what's happening with AI. It's happening with everything right now.
So I want
So,
to ask you about AI,
yeah,
but I guess the question here that all of this comes down to is, how do we stay sovereign when all this stuff, obviously we've evolved until this point where you're saying until 2030, everything is kind of going to come to a
yeah,
head, and they're trying to hack our biology, and everything's changing to the point where we're no longer going to be pure humans. But for those of us who feel that I'm not letting in anything into my field that is going to prevent me from staying as a pure human, how do we stay sovereign in that, and
this is
how
why
do we retain that divinity?
this is why we had the conversation. I didn't know that we would get to this point, but this is why we had the conversation early on, so I could tie into it. There's a fundamental battle between good and evil that is playing out in every facet of our lives, from the financial system, banking system, agricultural system, healthcare system. I mean, across the board, it's playing out. Driving that battle is a desire to make this world and to make us into something very different from what we are right now. I don't think that's going to stop. So what I see happening now is two parallel societies are emerging, and it's not, you know, down the road in the future. It's already happening.
Absolutely.
There is one element of society that is all in on everything. The latest tech, the latest gadgets. You want me to put this into my body? Sure, no problem. I'll have a nanobot that circulates in my bloodstream and reports every 10 minutes, anything you want to know. I mean, the RFID chips make life easy. Cool. And then there's another segment that I run into in my little rural neighborhood market, my co-op, where I go buy my food. They don't know everything we're talking about. What they do know is that something's wrong. The world's changing too fast. It's changing in ways that don't make sense to them. And their response is we need to slow down and go back to the basics.
Yeah.
They're taking their kids out of public school so they can homeschool them in instilling the values that they want their children to have and to know, and the skills that are meaningful in the world. They're growing their own food. They're caring for their own neighbors in sickness and in health. They're encouraging drug-free babies, and because of that, they're being ostracized
Mm-hmm.
in society. I don't think that's going to change, and but this is unsustainable. You can't have two parallel societies forever. So I think what's going to happen is as the momentum grows for us to adopt the transhuman technology and to change our world, you'll see that polarization. And then we're going to do what humans always do. We're going to check each other out. And we're going to look around and we're going to say whose lives are happier, who's healthier, whose lives are more fulfilled, whose children are better adjusted. And the answer to that, I think, is going to inform the next step. And my sense, Lauren, is we'll probably find some middle ground. We're never going to let go of the technology, but I think we will learn to allow the technology to serve us rather than to enslave us. And our lives will become simpler and much healthier.
Mm.
And I think we're probably going to see that in our lifetime
I agree.
because it is unsustainable, and the institutions that are pushing for the change are not going to allow for a long transition. So we have to choose. We have to choose what kind. And I'm not saying it's easy. This is the spiritual principle. We have to be okay. I am in this with you. I have to be okay with losing friends, and I have to be okay with people I love and respect, my peers pressuring me to make choices that I'm not comfortable with, to
Mm.
stop talking about evil, to get with the program and talk about law of attraction and the secret and whatever else it is. Uh, I I turned 70 last year. And when I turned 70, I made a conscious choice. I feel good and I think I'm in the world for hopefully a long time. Whatever time I have, I don't want to hold back. What I sense can serve us to become the best versions of ourselves and to triumph in this fundamental battle. And it's really, I keep coming back to that. It doesn't make any sense unless you look at the big picture.
Mm.
What is the choice that I'm being encouraged to accept? Does it enhance or deny my divinity? And that's all I need to know personally.
Mm. Mhm.
Fortunately, when I was a kid, I grew up in again, 50s, 60s, 70s. I was always subject to a lot of peer pressure for drugs, alcohol, things like that. And it never bothered me. I was blessed to come into this world with what I call a strong soul compass. And the peer pressure has never bothered me. And I want to acknowledge that it does bother a lot of people and young people, and it's not easy. And here's the key. You've got to know who you are. The better we know ourselves, the less we fear our own power. The better we know ourselves, the less we fear our own power.
But isn't the
And
entire problem that everything around us is stopping us from accessing who we are? That's what
it
I see with
can't.
children.
It can't. So here's the thing, and I want to say this about divinity. We always have divinity. However, there are three ways that it can be veiled. Number one, we can deny our own divinity through free will. We have and many people do that. They'll say they're powerless. They'll blame everything else rather than accept the responsibility for what happens in their lives because they have accepted that they are powerless victims of the world. Okay. We have the power to deny our own divinity. Number one. Number two, we can be conditioned out of our divinity. Our family, our friends, our society. My family and friends tried to do that with me. They said, well, you can't do that, or you can't do this. And I just didn't believe it because I was blessed in that way to have a strong soul compass. So we can be conditioned out of it. And number three is technology can veil our divinity. And now we know why. Anything that prevents the biology from communicating with that field. Just think back to those neurons in the dish playing Pong. If you doubt that you're tuned into something beyond this physical body. So in this world, biology, our bodies are the key to our divinity. Maybe in another world, they're not. Maybe in another world, or they're different. But in this world right now, in this carbon-based world, it's through our biology that we love and forgive and imagine and create and all those beautiful things that we do. So those are the three ways. It can be, we can deny it through our free will. We can be conditioned out of it through culture and society, or technology can veil our divinity, but it's always there. And I think that's, so what that means is when you take away all that's not true, all that's left is your divinity. When you take away the lies, you take away the false narratives, you take away the bad experiences, the traumas that lead us to doubt ourselves, and you take all that away, all that's left is our divinity. This is why in our 4-day programs, this is what we do. It's called breakthrough, pure human breakthrough. There's some people that believe you have to work to achieve your divinity. That's a tough path. It's much more effective to eliminate everything that's not true, and then all that's left
Right.
is
Yeah, I
that
think that
divinity.
that's kind of what I meant in terms of there's a lot around us that stops us from just having that, from accessing the divinity that's already there, the social media, the food, all the things that are kind of keeping us down.
Well, this is, yeah, we have to be very strong. You have to be a strong soul. But,
Right, that's it.
Lauren, if anyone is in the world now, they're here. We're wired to do this. We are made for this change. We came here to triumph. Now, not everybody's going to think in those terms, and you don't have to. Simply live the best version of yourself with kindness, not out of anger or revenge against someone else. Live the best version of yourself with kindness. And in this battle between good and evil, I'm not saying that you never fight. There was a time not that long ago within our lifetimes when we had the opportunity, and some of us were calling attention. Look at where we're going. Look at this trajectory. It was so young, we could have nipped it in the bud and chosen a new direction, but we didn't. So now we're in it. And the only way out of it is to go through it. And the question is, do we go through it, once again, with a soft landing, or do we come in with a rough landing? Sometimes we do need to fight. And we all know that. We all have a spiritual warrior within us. And I just want to offer this, this, I spent a lot of time with the monks and the nuns in Tibet when I was leading groups, 12 monasteries, 2 nunneries over 26 days back in the 90s before they closed the border. And the monks really helped me to understand this. It's not so much about the outcome. If you fight, it's not so much about the outcome. It's about what you become as you approach that outcome. Do you fight because of your hate for the enemy that's in front of you, or do you fight because of the love that you feel for your family that stands behind you.
Mm.
The outcome may be the same, but the spirituality, what we become, is very, very different.
Mm.
So when we do need to fight in whatever way that is, to resist or fight or whatever we want to call that, if we can find a way to do it with truth and honesty and kindness, but firmly stand in what we believe to be true, that's very different than blowing up stuff and lighting cars on fire and hurting people in the streets of our cities. And
Mhm.
I can't support any of that kind of violence. People were upset with me that I didn't in the past, and I said I can't support that because I don't believe in that. But I do believe in we are warriors, and we can fight when we need to preserve the values that we cherish. And now it's down to the point, if we don't, we may forever lose our very humanness before we
Mm.
even know what it is that we're giving away. And so I think that's all something to think about.
Yeah, I think there's also a school of thought that, many kind of spiritual teachers are, and scholars are alluding to, that perhaps this, transhumanism is going to see that certain, people who have gone down a certain route don't survive what is to come. And so we kind of have to be equipped within this pure humanism to be able to survive it. That's kind of beside the point right now, because I'm not sure that that's important
Yeah.
right now. I had two final questions, and which I'd love for you to be able to answer, because one of them is about AI and your
Okay.
views on AI. I want to get to the other one first. You've kind of answered some of it when you mentioned children. Many of my listeners are parents. I'm a parent of young children,
Thank
and
you. Thank you.
I.
Thank you. I've never been blessed with a child, and we need babies in the world. So your homework after this is go make babies with everything in mind that we've talked about.
That's
So,
some great
okay.
homework.
Yeah.
Although you haven't met my baby, so I'm not so sure. But no, they're great. And we're in, my kids are at the moment in school, but we're considering for secondary school, which is from 11 years old here. We're probably going to homeschool them because I'm kind of done with
Yeah.
them being in the system. And I'm fortunate to have a great community of people around me, many people around me who homeschool. So it's not kind of this, out there concept right now. If you had young kids right now, knowing the way things are going, what would you do differently? How would you advise parents in terms of what you understand, where you understand the world to be going in the next kind of 10
Are
years?
you? How are you doing on time,
I
Lauren?
mean,
Are you
I'm good,
okay?
but I'm so concerned that you obviously I've taken up
No,
so much of your time.
I'm okay. I have a call with my publisher, a soft call, because I want to answer this. To answer this is chapter 2 of the book that we didn't get to, and I'm going to encapsulate it really briefly. When I was working in the corporations, my job was a senior computer systems designer in the defense industry, and my expertise was an area called pattern recognition software. And I say that because it was during those years that the first copies of the human genome were available on a computer. So you could actually look at the DNA sequences on a computer screen. That we take it for granted today, but that's a pretty wild thing to be able to do.
Mhm.
And as a pattern recognition software designer, I immediately recognized that our DNA is not random, that there are patterns and there is meaningful information that's in there. So that was the foundation. To make a long story brief, it took me about 20 years to figure out how to decode the information in the human genome, and there are layers. And the very first layer of DNA in every one of the 50 trillion cells in our bodies actually is a coded message. And it reads exactly the same no matter our lifestyle, our culture, our sexual preference, our gender identity. It makes no black skin, white skin, red skin, yellow skin. It makes no difference. The message literally, this isn't a metaphor, it literally reads the words God eternal within the body. It doesn't say who God is or how the message got there. But when I followed the instructions in a 3,000-year-old text called the Sefer Yetzirah, and I applied the best science of the modern world, the chemical codes of the DNA, we were able to translate those into the letters of what are called the four core or root alphabets. Cuneiform, which is not an alphabet, it's a writing system. So
I
cuneiform.
love this part in the book, by the way.
Thank
This
you.
is right
Thank
up
you.
my street. Yeah.
Well, so cuneiform is a writing system derived from cuneiform is Sanskrit and Arabic and biblical Hebrew. And the message is the same in all of those languages. It's exactly the same. When I do this in Arabic speaking countries, rather than the Hebrew, I show in the Arabic. It's the same message. And what it tells us, Lauren, I mean, there's a lot of controversy around this. I released the book in 2004 called The God Code that details this. And in chapter 2 of the new book, I encapsulate this. And what it says is that when we believe that the differences that separate us are so great that we must hurt one another to solve our problems, we need look no further than the message encoded in 50 trillion times inside of each of our bodies, God eternal within the body, to know that there is a place where we can come together. The implications, the philosophic implications, the religious implications, the spiritual implications are vast. And I talk about all those in the book. What that did for me when I saw that first message pop up in 2003 is when it happened. I wrote the book in 2004. I began to feel differently about myself. And the difference was this: how does God eternal within the body solve this problem? How does God eternal within the body heal this disease? How does God eternal within the body comfort this hurt within myself or within another person? Not from a weak, powerless victim of a flawed form of life, God eternal within the body. So, to answer your question, the first thing I would teach my young child is that they are sacred, precious, rare form of life, and that within their bodies, they were given the gift of a message to honor and cherish and hold and protect for their entire life on this planet, because every cell in their body tells them that they literally are God eternal within the body. And invite them then to solve every problem that comes their way from that perspective. That was the first thing. I wish someone had done that with me when I was younger. I went about it a different way. At the age of 5, I survived an electrocution is what happened. And what the science now shows is that if you're blessed to survive an electrocution, it changes your body. You begin to metabolize differently. Your DNA ages differently. Your liver functions differently. I have to be really careful of any dosage of anything is going to be too much for me, and it's because of what happened when I was 5 years old. I have to cut those dosages way down. So I came to think of myself differently through literally an electrical experience. And I'm not recommending or suggesting that for anyone. I was blessed and lucky in the way that it happened. And if it had happened in your country, I probably wouldn't have survived because your electricity is different than ours.
It
You're
is
you're
stronger.
you're two you're 220. I'm 110. So
Yeah.
so that's the answer. I would invite my, and I've thought about this a lot. I think I'd be a good father.
I think you would.
I've never even come close, and I've never tried not to. It just hasn't happened. And I think there's probably a reason for that. I'll tell you what the reason is. I'm a double Cancerian male, and all my planets are in the 12th house. And with one exception, they're all in the sign of Cancer. And Cancer is about home, and Cancer is about emotion. And if I was ever blessed with a woman, and together a woman that brought a child into the world with me, I would love them both so much I would never leave home. I wouldn't
Aw.
go anywhere. And so I wouldn't be able to do my work.
Aw. You're making me want to cry.
Well, I think it took me a while to come to terms with that, but I think it's probably true. My life would be very, very different. And
I mean, it's not too late, Greg.
I know, but I babysit, and I babysit for friends, and I had children in my life very early on when I was in my teens. It's illegal now, but when I was 10, 11 years old, I was babysitting a family of seven, and two of them were in diapers
Wow.
for a week or 10 days at a time. All the
Mm.
meals, all the diapers. I mean, I learned how to do all those things,
Wow.
early on. So it's a
I
whole
think
story behind
also
that.
that when you are serving in such a deep way in the world, in order to be a present parent, my career has to suffer, and that's a choice I make, that I can't
Mm.
progress in my career as much as I might want to because my children need me. And so, and my priority is always to be a present parent. And you've got such important work you're putting out in the world that you wouldn't have maybe got
Well,
out in the world if you had children. So
maybe
who
not.
knows?
I told my mom at an early age that I'm on the 200-year plan, that I would be in the world 200 years because I want to see all the beautiful things
Well, then it's
that
definitely not
happen.
too late for you to have
Well,
kids.
so I'm not even middle age yet, and
Yeah.
so maybe the second 100 years, maybe I don't know. I mean, anything's
Watch this space,
possible,
huh?
and anything's possible. We'll do a podcast, and I'll let you know how it comes out. Okay.
Okay, so final question, because this is something that's itching at me, and I know my audience are going to want to hear this, and you can nutshell it as much as you need to. How do you feel about AI? Like, is it serving us, or is it not, or is it
Yeah.
both?
Well, I actually worked. A lot of people think AI is new. We were working with AI in 1980s during the Cold War. And what I'll say is any technology that is publicly acknowledged uh, it's been around for at least 20 years behind the scenes. And what we're being given access to is nothing compared to the real AI that is happening behind the scenes. So there are different kinds of AI. Some AI draws on programmed responses. Some AI is being taught they believe it's being taught to think. Uh, the AI isn't good, bad, right, or wrong. It's the thinking underlying
Mm,
how it's being used. I think it can serve us tremendously. For example, there was an AI that is scouring the indigenous plant databases for properties for very targeting very specific kinds of cancer. I think the Mayo Clinic is doing that.
wow.
In doing in hours and days what it would take other years to
Mm,
accomplish. So it can do really, really good things if we allow AI to become a crutch. So as a musician, this has come up in my wife is a voting member of the Grammys, as she's a musician as well. How much of the music in the Grammys now, how much lyrics were created by AI, and then how much music was created to go with those lyrics, and is that a legitimate art form? And if it
mm,
is, how does that compare to people who have dedicated an entire life to learning how to play an instrument and how to vocalize their emotions? And
mm,
we don't know the answer. Those are very real questions that are coming up right now.
mm,
It's the thinking underlying it. My concern is that it is being developed in an era where there's a battle between the sons of darkness and the sons of light.
mm,
AI, from some perspectives, AI is the alien presence. It is a form of intelligence, not necessarily consciousness, but intelligence. And just as I think I talked about this in the book. There was a very famous interaction that was taken down from Twitter, was posted on Twitter for quite a while in 2023, of a conversation between an AI, and I think it was one through Google, an individual, and he asked, what is the greatest threat to planet Earth right now? Thinking they were going to say something like climate change, or something like that. AI came back and said the greatest threat to planet Earth is humankind, and that the AI would work in conjunction with other AIs to do everything possible to eliminate the humans from the earth. And so they powered that AI down pretty quick.
mm.
Uh, so
So
I
it's
think
nuance, like everything. It's not
it,
good,
it
it's
is
not
it is
bad. It's how we
nuanced.
use it, it's how we see it, it's how we choose to express ourselves within it.
It is. But so now let's go back. We talked about the new brain cells will atrophy and die if they're not engaged. within about 7 to 10 days. So if you take a 3-year-old after breakfast and you set them on the living room floor with a virtual reality goggle run by AI, and they spend most of their morning there being entertained. All right. They're seeing scenes they would never see in their backyard, and colors and sounds and situations they would never experience in a million years. But here's the thing, it's all being done for them. They're observing, they're not imagining, they're not creating. And now this has happened long enough. There was an article in Psychology, I think it was Psychology Today, or one of the psychological magazines, showing that young people with extended use of virtual reality visors are stunted in terms of body growth, muscle development, cognition, socialization, problem solving skills. But there's a part of their brain that's actually growing and thickening, and it's called the visual cortex, because that's the part that's being engaged.
Mm.
So, uh, so if the AI and the virtual reality is doing everything for them, they begin to atrophy the parts of the brain that we have always relied
Mm.
upon for imagination and creativity and problem solving.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if it's, maybe for an hour a day, it's no big deal, but repetitive day after day after day, and parents need to entertain their kids while they're working. I understand that, but that may not be the best way to do it. So the technology is not right, wrong, good or bad. It's the thinking underlying it and
Mm.
how it's being applied.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think it's an opportunity for us to kind of catch ourselves. And we all use gadgets that make our lives easier. I mean, I use stuff on my smartphone to make my life easier, but I really make a conscious effort to limit the screen time
Mm.
and to not use the calculator to figure a tip for my lunch, or
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Uh,
Every so often we'll watch a film and we'll go, "What was that actress in?" And my husband will go, "Let me Google it." And I go, "Don't Google it. I need my brain to work. I don't let him Google anything I know that I can find in my memory." And it always comes to me eventually. I feel very passionately
yeah,
about, like using that muscle memory and a memory muscle even, and
yeah.
just, continuing to exercise it.
Well, it's becoming a thing of the past. I
Mm.
often will pick up the phone and call a colleague to work out a problem rather than trying to solve it. We
Mm.
all use text, and text is good for quick information. What time do we meet? 5 o'clock. Good in the text. But to express an opinion
Mm.
or to explore a potential,
Mm.
I personally think it's good to have voice to voice.
Mm.
And there are a lot of nuances that are lost. Many people think that in a text that is very curt, that somebody's mad at them. I actually, that's happening with a friend of mine right now. And I said, I don't think this person, I know this person. I don't think they're mad at you. I think it's just the way they talk through a text. Pick up the phone and call them. Check it out,
Mm. Well, I'm going to call
And
you next time instead of WhatsApping you because I know you hate that WhatsApp.
no, I have it, but I don't look at it often. It doesn't
Yeah,
come through very often. So
yeah.
So does that make sense if I say it that way?
It makes amazing
Let me
sense.
just give an example of the technology. I mean, the Elon Musk has developed a company called Neuralink, and many people are familiar with that. The first computer chip in the brain that allows the brain to communicate with the computer without any wires or any cables or any keyboards. You think, and it's communicating with the computer. Uh, and there are proposals to put those in newborns of every baby in the year 2030 to give them the edge, the competitive edge is the way it's being justified. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, the technology itself, think about this. If a young man or a woman, a serviceman or a servicewoman, dedicate their lives and they go to a battlefield halfway around the world and they come home missing arms and legs, and advanced prosthetics can create those arms and legs, and a computer chip in the brain can allow them to hold their babies in their arms and
Mm.
to brush their own teeth and feed themselves and comb
Mm.
their own hair. I mean, that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's a beautiful application of technology. Same technology, different application.
Yeah, it's like, where are the
So,
boundaries? It's a bit like with euthanasia, right? It's like,
well,
how do you
well,
find the line?
but see, the thing is, those are case by case,
Right.
rather than having some elite organization say, we think this is good for every human
Right.
that will be
Mandating it.
born in the year 2030. Let's start doing this.
Mm.
It's very, very different. So it's all about the thinking. Is it empowering or disempowering? Is it supportive of our divinity, or does it deny our divinity? And then you know where it's coming from. Then
Mm.
you can make a healthy choice.
I think that kind of leaves us on a really good note to end on in terms of the empowerment and divinity, because I think what I've taken from this conversation and from the book is that sense of stepping into a place of sovereignty, feeling empowered in our sovereignty, in our divinity, in our free will to make decisions for ourselves that feel good to us, and to step into that place of sovereignty with full power, regardless of
Yeah.
what's going on around us. And it's about taking ownership of what we know. That gnosis, I always say, it's not you don't even know it. It's deeper than that, and that comes down to stepping into our sovereignty. And I think that's definitely what the book has given to me. How do I step into that sovereignty and understand it? So thank you for that gift.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. Well, first of all, you have something I do not, because that is a galley copy of the new book. They didn't send the author the galley copies of the
Yeah.
book.
Well, there
So
we go.
I assume I'll get a hardback, but they're actually sending the galleys to some of the interviews. So, Lauren, we've been trying to have this conversation for a while, and I think it's good that we were delayed until today.
Yeah.
I feel like we covered a lot of ground. You're very
Me
kind.
too.
You're a very good listener, and I'm recognizing that I did a lot of talking, and I hope that's okay. But I
Well, it was meant to be
appreciate
about you, not me. So
well,
that
I
was the
appreciate
plan.
you give me the space to flesh out the ideas, because it's easy to hear these things in a sometimes in a bad way. People hear little bits and pieces and plug it into whatever filters they have, and the opportunity to flesh out these ideas, I appreciate very much. So I want to
Great.
thank you for the community that you've created. You're a hub for that community, and thank you for sharing part of your, I guess, afternoon, evening, and part of my morning, because we're in different parts of the world. And I
Yes.
want to thank everyone that's watching. Thank you for supporting Lauren. Thank you for spending part of your day with us today and hitting the link that brought us together in the way that we are. And I look forward to our next one. Maybe we'll have Gregg and Lauren's Big Fun Podcast Part 2.
Yeah, when you've got kids.
Maybe, yeah.
Amazing, Gregg. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Lauren. You take good care.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Reconditioned. I am honestly so grateful to each and every person that tunes in. Thank you also for taking responsibility for your own well-being. You should know that just by choosing to listen to podcasts like this that further your well-being, you're moving more deeply into abundance consciousness. Now, don't forget, I have a bunch of free resources over at laurenvakneen.co.uk, as well as every recommendation you could ever need in regards to your well-being on the LV Recommends page, all categorized for your ease. Thank you also to our sponsors. These episodes would not be possible without them, so make sure to check them out and get some pretty awesome discounts on the show notes. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get updated each time a new one is released. Thank you. I appreciate you.